Hey guys, so this is going to be my guide, free-to-play guide, for the generals in Evony. We're not going to cover all of the generals, we're just going to cover the basic core of generals that every player needs. So who is this video for? It's for new players, if it's your first time playing the game, if you've never delved into the world of which generals are viable and which ones are not, then this video is for you. It's for players that are free to play. If you spend money, you can also find use in it, but it's mainly tailored towards people who are free to play or spend very little. When I say very little, I mean like under $100, little. Players on a new server. So if you've played the game for a while before, you want to start fresh on a new server, you have a brand new account, these generals are going to help you get your roster up and running a lot faster than you would if you tried some other tactics. And the last person this is for is for teachers. No, not academic teachers, but if you have a guild and you have new players that are wanting to learn, you can send them this video and they'll get a basic understanding of which generals they should be looking for. And yeah, that's who this video is for. Alright, so let's talk about where to get generals without spending money. The easiest place to get them is at the tavern, where you're going to spend mainly gold to get them, and some crystals as well to refresh it, but it is by far the cheapest way and most reliable way to get generals. The second place is relics, the things you find on the map that you explore, and you get some general pieces out of it. These are, they're very free. They don't require any gems, but they are going to take a while to get a general up and running just from farming relics. And the last one is the Trial of Knights event. If this is your first time playing and you're a newer player, I wouldn't worry about this. This is more of a slightly more advanced thing where you use Blood of Ares to get rewards from the events. And there are some generals in the events that you can get and farm reasonably efficiently for little to no money. So with these list of generals, we're not going to talk about the Trial of Knights generals. Everyone knows which ones in there are decent, and most of the ones in there are better than any of the ones on this list. So you can just say you want to farm one from that category, then you can farm that one and use the other ones from the free-to-play list that I'm giving. And there are a lot of other places you can get these generals from. One of my personal favorite is when you upgrade your champion, you get some of the summoning tokens, which once you get to a level where you can actually get some of the more premium summoning tokens, you can get some decent generals. Now, these are some of the big things we're going to be looking at today. The leading or marching clause. Now, what that is each general in their description, they will be phrased as this takes effect when general is leading the army, when army is marching, leading the army to attack, those kinds of things. The most important thing is the leading clause. When it just says leading, it doesn't mention attacking or marching or anything like that. That means you can use that general as a defensive general. These clauses don't take effect in when you're in buildings, like in Battlefield, and it's pretty much the only use for it is when you are defending. So it's not as a huge deal, but it is worth considering. The second consideration is dragons. If you're not spending a lot of money, then you're realistically only going to get 1 or 2 dragons within a reasonable amount of time. And that's going to be your red dragon, which is for ranged troops, and then the purple dragon, which can be used on mounted or siege machines. So those are the 2 dragons that you can possibly get without spending money. So it's important that we consider which generals are going to need a dragon, so we don't have all generals that need dragons. And the last one is assistance. We're not going to talk about assistance in this video, and here's the reason. You're going to get some of the premium summoning tokens from like leveling up your champion. You'll get them from the events and whatnot. You're going to get your hands on a couple premium generals here and there, and that's who you're going to want to use as your assistant. When you get those premium generals that are better, generally they're better than the free generals as assistants, and that's who you're going to use for these main generals. Now, for the ground generals, we've got Trajan, Maida, and Yuffie. Trajan is a tavern general, and he does have the leading clause, so that means hypothetically you could put him on the wall to defend. Yuffie is in the tavern, and he can lead the mounted as well as the ground, so that makes him very versatile. He can do ground and mounted at the same time, so you only have to invest in one general instead of two. Maida is a relics only, and he doesn't have a leading clause. His specialty is only for ground. He's only on this list because he is a decent general, but I probably would not recommend investing in him due to the fact that he's not very flexible, and being in relics only, it's going to take you a while to farm him for a general that's only going to be able to do ground troops. So if you're looking to choose a ground general as a free player, choose Trajan or Yuffie. And once we're done going through the slideshow, I'm going to go through some combinations of which generals you should get and that I would recommend. Next up, we have the mounted generals. Once again, we see Yuffie and we have Roland. Please notice Hannibal is not on this list. A lot of people think Hannibal is a good general. He is not. Roland is better by far, and so is Yuffie. As far as mounted generals go, Roland is the better general. But what Yuffie has is that he can compete with Roland, but he is more flexible because he can do the ground too. Also, Roland is in the tavern, and he is in relics as well. So if you want to farm Roland, you can farm him in both locations, and you can farm him pretty quickly. Next, we have the ranged generals, which we're going to be looking at Electra and Winfield Scott. Now, Minamoto is not on here. If you're a fan of Minamoto, I'm sorry, but he's just the leading clause that he has just doesn't justify the lower stats that he has across the board. So these are the two that I would recommend. Now, Electra is only in the relics, so it's going to take a while to farm her, and she does need a dragon. However, if you don't have a dragon, once she's fully maxed out, you're only losing about 40% attack. And to put that into context for newer players, Electra fully maxed out will give you somewhere in the range of like 300% attack. So losing 40% isn't the end of the world. She's still usable without a dragon, but definitely better with a dragon. Now, Winfield Scott, he's available in the tavern. He is very competitive with Electra, and honestly, I'm not sure why more people don't use him. He's a very solid general. Now we have the siege generals. We have Ulysses S. Grant and Emperor Shiwan. Now, with these two, Grant is the better one by far. The only reason I included the Emperor was because he doesn't need a dragon. Ulysses S. Grant does need a dragon. Both of these two are available in the tavern. As I said, Grant needs a dragon, but if you don't have a dragon, he only loses 25% attack on his total. Same story with Electra. He's still very usable without a dragon, and I would prefer a Ulysses S. Grant without a dragon over an Emperor. So I think he is by far the winner, but if for some reason you don't want to get Grant, you can use Emperor. He is a usable general. And lastly, we have the defense generals. We have Zachary Taylor, who is available only in the relics. So if you get him, it's going to take a while to farm him. The advantage of having him is he is a ranged general. So you can have a ranged focused defense with your keep. My personal favorite is Richard the Lionheart. Richard the Lionheart is available in the tavern, so he's reasonably easy to farm. And his overall stats are very solid across the board, so he's a well-rounded general for defending. The note about Richard, though, however, is in the early game, when you don't have any stars on him, when you don't have any ascension on him, he is going to be a very poor defense general. He's only really usable once you get him to 3 or 4 red stars. That's when I would recommend starting to use him. Before that, he's not really worth it. The last one is Trajan. Trajan is an interesting one, and I'm sure I'll get some comments saying, why would you put Trajan on the wall? Here's my thought process. So Trajan has the leading clause, so he can be on the wall. And I'm speaking from experience with this because Trajan, well, is my defense general. Because in the early game, when you're first starting out, the first march that people are going to get up and running is the ranged march. And what's strong against ranged troops? Well, it's ground troops. So if you invest in Trajan and you have a strong Trajan, you can build a keep that is based on the ground troops. And when you're a lower power, a lot of higher power players don't even bother to scout you. They just send their default archer march, and you can deal some heavy damage against them. I've had lots of battles where I've had a positive power exchange against far stronger opponents just because they didn't scout me. They sent an archer march against me, and they smacked against my wall of ground. So that's why I think Trajan is a very viable defensive general, especially early in the game. One strategy that I think is pretty useful is if you have Trajan, you can use him as your defense general until you get Richard the Lionheart to a point where you can actually use him on the wall. Now, that's it for the presentation. We're going to change formats. We're going to look at some of the spreadsheets, and we're going to look at some of the combinations of these generals that I think you should farm, and one of the ones that are cheap or interesting. Okay, here's the spreadsheet. As you see, we have all these stats in a nice compact area. If you want to take a screenshot of this and use this for future reference, I'll also have it linked below for the Google Drive and all the rest of my spreadsheets. But to review what we talked about, for the ground troops, your choices are Trajan or Yuffie. Trajan will do the ground and can also be used as defense. Yuffie can do ground and mounted. Maida is an option, but he's going to take longer to farm, and he's not as versatile. For the mounted, you have Roland, who is a very strong general, can be farmed quite quickly, and Yuffie, who's a very flexible general. For the ranged, you have Electro, who's going to be long to farm and has a dragon, but she is a good general. And you have Winfield Scott, who is in the tavern, and he does have the leading clause, so you could put him on the wall. Of the two, I would definitely recommend Winfield Scott, because the slight advantages that Electra has doesn't justify, in my mind, the cost for farming her, and then the need to use a dragon with her. For Siege, you have Ulysses, Tavern General with a dragon, or Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang is not a great Siege General. Ulysses is far better, but if for some reason you don't want to use Ulysses, he is an option. For the wall, you have Richard the Lionheart, who is the all-arounder defensive general, but he takes a little bit longer to get up and running to an effective point. And then you have Zachary Taylor, who is the range-focused defensive general, but he does take longer to farm. Now, here's some of the combinations that I think are viable. Option 1, you get Trajan, Roland, Winfield Scott, Ulysses, and Richard the Lionheart. With this combination, you have Trajan to cover your ground, and while you get Richard to a point where he's up and running, you can use Trajan or Winfield Scott to cover the defensive aspect of it. It's not ideal, but it is a decent stopgap measure. You also get Roland. He's the only one that you'd be farming from relics with this combo, so that's going to make him even faster to farm. So you'll be able to get a strong mounted general reasonably quickly. Ulysses is the only one on this list that needs a dragon, so once you get your first dragon, you can just give it to Ulysses. Option 2. We go with Yuffie for the grounded mounted, get 2 birds with 1 stone. We get Electra as a dragon and a relic general. Ulysses, because even if you don't put a dragon on Ulysses, he's still the better general. And then lastly, Richard or Zachary Taylor. It doesn't really matter who you use on the wall. With this one, you could also substitute Electra for Winfield Scott and use Scott for the wall until you get Richard or until you get Zachary Taylor. Honestly, these combinations are just ideas to give you to think about. And lastly, this is the absolute cheapest way to get all of these things covered. You farm Yuffie for your ground and your mounted, you farm Winfield Scott for your ranged and your wall, and you farm Quinn for your siege. You get all your categories checked off. It's not the best, but they do fill those roles. You don't have to farm any of them from relics. No dragons are required. It's 3 generals total. 3 generals to fill 5 roles. So essentially with these combinations, I would recommend just choose the one that you think is best. Of all these options, I think that option 1 is the most effective. Maybe substitute the Euphies for the Trajan and Roland, but use whatever combination you're comfortable with. But these are the most optimal free-to-play generals. They're the quickest to farm, and they're the best overall for when you're not breaking the bank. If y'all found this video useful, please share it with new players. Share it with people who are looking for help with generals. If you have any questions about the assistants, because I didn't go into that, you could leave a comment below, or you could go look at my other videos where I cover the assistants. I have a lot of videos on all these different categories, and I cover assistants in each of them, so you can see who the most optimal assistant is. You can also go look at my spreadsheets on my Google Drive, and you can take a look at it from yourself. Say you have a specific general and you want to see how they stack up to the others. You can go look at all my calculators, and everything that I use for these videos are on there. So yeah, I hope y'all found this video useful, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.